Okay, so for today's design portion, we're going to separate it into two different sections. The first one is just going to be Introduction to Design. So, what is design? So, a lot of times when people think about design, they're thinking about only the visual aspects. That'll just be like when you open a website, for example, you'll think about the color, the pictures, everything like that. But it's important to consider that design is not purely aesthetics. So, we want to approach design like a problem solving. We want to apply a problem solving mindset to design. And you can kind of approach that with this chart. So from the top, you have the surface, and it's definitely going to be visual design. So if we take the scope of a website, for example, again, that's going to be like the colors and the pictures. But if you go down, you'll have the skeleton. And in that portion, it'll cover the text that you put in there and the information that you put in there. After that, let me make this tab bigger. Okay, after that, you'll have the structure of it. So this will be the layout and where you put everything. And the scope is going to cover if the design is intuitive and if it flows well. And the strategy is going to cover the user needs and business objectives, which we'll cover a little bit later in another lecture. But, okay. This is a few different types of designs that kind of overlap with each other. And some of them might sound familiar to you, but the ones that we're going to focus on the most today, or in our course, is going to be user interface design, user experience design, and human-centered design. So first we're going to define user interface, and that's basically the space where interactions between humans and machines occur. So you can kind of think of that like for remotes, the buttons are going to be what people interact with. So that's going to be the user interface. And user experience is a broader scope, and it covers a person's emotions and attitudes when they're using the product. So that kind of ties into human-centered design, which incorporates the human perspective into a design approach. So this specifically is the design for humans, and it kind of is similar to user experience design, but you want to think of that as broader than human-centered design because the user could be not human. So we'll cover human-centered design in a little lecture after as well. But basically, you want to find the intersection between form and function. So while you do want to design really visual, appealing designs, you also want to make sure that your designs actually focus on serving the users, and it's something that could be really, that meet their needs. So a lot of times when people take this class, they're really worried about their design skills. They're like, oh, my designs always look really bad, or I would rather code. And no, that's really understandable, but we want to emphasize that design is something that you can work on and improve. And a lot of people think that I just don't have an eye for design, but we really want to encourage seeking inspiration from other people's designs. Sometimes that helps you a lot, especially if you're just starting out. And we want to encourage you guys to practice design a little bit every day, builds up, and then at the end of this class you can see yourself being in a much better design space. So fidelity is also another term that we use a lot in this class. Specifically, fidelity is describing prototypes, and prototypes that you work on before you actually make a final design of the product. So first we'll start off with a low or mid fidelity mockup, which is basically just to form the content. So you see here, it's just boxes, blank boxes or blank text boxes that you can kind of play around with to kind of see which layout that you like better. This is like a really rough first draft. And then from here, you move on to a high fidelity mockup. So you'll see there's a lot more color and the content is all structured, and it's basically gonna look a lot like your final design. So you can see from the low fidelity to the high fidelity, there's quite a bit of difference. And then from the high fidelity, you can move on to interactive prototypes. This is something that's become really popular in the past few years, but especially with mobile designs, you can see on the right over here, there's like buttons that you can click and animations that happen when you click these buttons. And that's something really cool that you can play with as well when you make your design. But basically, to put it all together, you want to go through these 3 steps: wireframe, mockup, and HTML. So we'll kind of break it down in this slide. But on the left, there is the wireframe, and then the website on the top right, and then on the bottom is HTML. So you kind of see there's a really big box, a really empty box here for wireframe, and then this is the header, and then underneath that is the reviews. So if you break it down, you can see that in the HTML as well. So for the first div, you have the image, and then underneath that, you have the price, and then right underneath that, you have the rating as well. So that kind of helps you see everything together on the same page. But for creative tools, this is something we kind of went over in our last lecture, but we're going to focus on prototyping. And in this class, we use Figma the most, but Adobe XD, Sketch, and Illustrator are also really good tools that you can use for projects outside of class. But yeah, just to sum up our first part of the design lecture, we encourage you guys that, like I said earlier, practice is really important. Don't feel discouraged if your first designs don't come out exactly like you want it to. You're in this class for a reason, and we'll help you guys develop your skills. But yeah, for that part, do you guys have any questions or any questions about the programming lecture before? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next section of design. So we're going to cover visual hierarchy and spacing. And we're going to break it down to the importance of space and macro and micro level spacing. So first, importance of space. This is kind of an interactive activity with you guys, but could you guys tell me what's wrong with this design? You can shout it out or you can raise your hand, but there are no wrong answers. What do you guys think is wrong with this? Yes.
There's no room for anything to create.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's really, there's a lot going on. Okay, anything else? Yes. Yeah, exactly. So the design is really clustered. There's a lot of colors, a lot of links, a lot of pictures. And this design as well might look familiar to you guys, but anything wrong with this one? Yes. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, really similar to the one before. It's just really cluttered. So what's wrong with cluttering? The problem with cluttering is that, like you said, there's too much going on. You don't know where to look, and it's really overwhelming to the user. They don't know where to start or what's important. Nothing really stands out in this page. And let's see. Okay, so yeah, you want to keep in mind that users aren't going to look at everything on your page if it's really clustered. And you want to create a visual hierarchy and kind of to lead them to where to look first. And you want to focus on quality over quantity. So also keep in mind that user attention is really precious, and no one's going to look at your website for like 10 minutes to try to figure everything out if it's really cluttered. Usually they're going to look at it for a few seconds and then find the main points, and then they're going to move on from there. So you want to make sure that you use the space intentionally, and you use the hierarchy of information, which we're going to cover right now. So a little bit of terminology. We have positive space and we have negative space, or white space. So the positive space is all the space that's filled up with content that can either be pictures or words, and the white space is going to be all the empty space. And this empty space is gonna emphasize the positive space, and it's gonna define it to create emphasis. So this is an example of using negative space and positive space. This is the Apple Store, one of them, but you can kind of see all of these tables here, they're set in rows, and in between them, there's walking space. So in this instance, the walking space is the white space, and the tables are the positive space. And this kind of shows you that the space hierarchy isn't used only in digital designs, but also in like architecture or spatial design as well. Okay, so this is Google. Probably very familiar with it, but you can see this website uses negative space and positive space as well. Negative space all around the sides, and the positive space just helps you focus a little bit more into the middle, because this is where they want you to click. So they are bringing emphasis to that space. But yeah, when you look at this page, your eyes are more drawn to the left of it, just because there's more white space and there's more emphasis around there, and then you kind of go over here and you read all of these lines. But You want to space your website strategically so people know where to look. Also, this is an example of line spacing. So this is why your teacher wants you to double space your essays, because it's much easier to read text like the one on the right opposed to the one on the left. So if you read really long contents of this, it's going to get tiresome to read all of this, and it's just going to be more comfortable in your eyes for you to place your text like the one on the right. But okay, macro and micro level spacing. So macro level spacing kind of covers bigger chunks of space between elements on the page, and micro level spacing is the more specific spaces that just makes the text and information stand out more. And I'll show you examples of this right now. So this is the Stripe website. You can see the macro level spacing is all around the text on the landing page. So they want you to focus on this right here, and they use white space all around in their background and in their contrast colors to create separation. So the background's white, text is black, and it also stands out a lot from the gradient as well. So micro level spacing is the spacing between elements. So you can see here between the header and the little text here, there's micro level spacing. And also padding and margin is something that we're going to cover in our programming lecture next week, I think, but same thing applies. For padding, you can see this is a button, and the text up above and below the text is padding, and that's the space that you want to leave to make the text more legible. And for margins, it's going to be the space between elements, so outside of your borders. And this is something that ties into spacing in CSS, which is going to be a really important concept for this class. So the CSS box model is something that we're going to come back to a lot. So you can kind of think of the box in the middle as the text from our button before. So it's going to be like the submit button, but this is the submit, and then the border is right here. So the padding is the space between your text and your border, and the margin is the space outside of it. And then for line width, it's also really important to consider how far you want your text to go in your websites. Just because reading this is much easier than reading this. Just because there's more space for your eyes to scan, it's more tiresome to read, and people are going to want to read it less. So yeah, you can see the comparison between these two. This is much more appealing to read and look at. But you do want to keep in mind that simple is not the same as barren. So you don't want to overuse white space. So you can kind of see in this picture, if we zoom in, this is the 61B website. But the information is really spread out in a way that's unorganized. So they do use a lot of white space, but it doesn't really serve the purpose of making the positive space stand out. You're kind of looking for where to start, but there's no pattern. Like, it's not alphabetically ordered, it's not ordered by section, and you don't really know how to navigate this. So this is not a good example of spatial design in websites. Okay, so this is their new website. This is much better. It's a dark mode. It's in dark mode, which we will cover in one of our later lectures. But you can see there's a contrast between the blue and the black background, which looks really nice. And their text is all sectioned in the middle, so the width isn't really wide. And I think it's also adjustable, actually, if you click on the website. So that's customizable. And yeah, you can see there's a hierarchy here. You know where to look. There's links everywhere, and you know where to click. Much more organized. But yes, you want to keep in mind, don't use too much white space, and you want to use it intentionally. So you want to create a rhythmic structure, and you can kind of see on the right here, this website is structured into different sections. So on the top, it's going to be the nav bar. This is the typical structure of any website that you'll see. So the nav bar on top, and then right here is the page that you'll see before you scroll down. And then this divides this section with this section. And this section, you can, I don't know if you can see on the screen, but it's like a light gray opposed to the white background here. And although it's not really obvious, it kind of creates a separation between the two. That's something that you want to do to create a rhythmic pattern. Okay, and also the use of symmetry and asymmetry. So Instagram is a really good example of symmetry. So they have their 3x3 or 3 by however long, however many posts you make grid, and it creates balance and structure. So there's always 3 here, and that is symmetrical always, but on the top you see they balance the symmetry with some asymmetry. So they have the profile picture here and your profile information here and the highlights as well. This is much less symmetrical than this space on the bottom. So also you can see in this example for the weight shift website that they use asymmetry, but they also balance it out. I mean, they use symmetry, but they also balance it out with asymmetry. So they made this Adobe box really big, and this bottom part is now asymmetrical, but the top part is still really symmetrical. Like you see their nav bar is centered, and so is this text right here. And you want to use this to create emphasis on whatever you want to draw your user's eyes to. So in this instance, it would be the Adobe picture. And some things to note, we will post cheat sheets for this class, typically for the coding section though. So we will have that all up on the ed and we'll let you know when we release them. And also, if you're interested in any of these design topics, design is a really, it's a really fluid topic. They always change, there's new trends in design. So you can check out this Medium article that we've linked down here to learn more about the 2023 design trends. And also, we want to make sure that you guys have a Figma account or have a Figma app downloaded on your computer, because next lab, I think next lab, we will be doing a Figma walkthrough. So you want to make sure that you have Figma ready. And yes, we'll give you guys more details for the next class. But okay, do you guys have any questions before we end lecture about anything? Okay, solid. I'm gonna stop recording.